Imagine writing a piece of software that can, literally save lives, but it's hard-coded to crash if the user doesn't follow your exact religious beliefs.
Right.
That was the 1938 manuscript of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, let's unpack this because today we are looking at how a few crucial edits open-sourced a really rigid manual into a massive global movement.
Yeah, I mean, it was essentially a complete rewrite of their operating system. And to understand why they had to do it, you really have to look at how aggressive that original 1938 text actually was.
Oh, for sure.
They printed like 400 of these spiral-bound multilith copies, mostly just to circulate for review. But the early groups were heavily influenced by the Oxford group, which was a Christian revivalist movement.
Okay, I see.
So the text was packed with these absolute directives, lots of, you must do this and thou shalt do that.
But wait, I have to push back a little on why that's inherently a bad thing. I mean, we are talking about the Great Depression here.
Oh yeah, completely desperate time.
Right, so these early pioneers were in literal life or death situations. Wouldn't someone at absolute rock bottom actually want strict rules? Like, if my life is falling apart, just hand me a manual and tell me exactly what to do.
Well, that makes logical sense, sure.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is what the medical professionals, specifically the psychiatrists, reviewing those 400 copies, what they pointed out.
Which is what?
It comes down to the specific psychology of an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to have deeply defiant personalities.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So if you corner someone who is naturally hostile to authority and you give them a list of thou shalts, they will instinctively rebel. The doctors warn that this authoritarian tone would just completely backfire.
So the strict rules were basically triggering the exact stubbornness that kept them drinking in the first place.
Precisely.
So they had to change the tone so the user wouldn't reject the code.
Exactly. They made this vital psychological shift from prescription to description. The rigid you must became a collaborative we ought. So instead of saying, this is what you must do to survive, it became this is what we did to survive.
Wow. And shifting from you must to this is what we did really forces you to look at the religious demands in the text. I mean, taking out those thou shalts created a massive friction point over how to handle spirituality.
Oh, absolutely. You suddenly had guys like Jim Burwell. He was an atheist member who had like 60 jail stints to his name.
Wait, 60?
Yeah, 60. And he went head-to-head with the religious founders. He was the one who championed this incredibly inclusive phrase, God as we understood him.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. By describing a higher power as something you could define yourself, they ensured people hostile to organized religion weren't automatically locked out.
Right. They stripped away the outside religious debates. That way the group could focus on a singleness of purpose, which was just, staying sober.
And they took this even further by removing physical barriers. Like, originally, for Step 7, the text demanded you physically get on our knees.
Which is a huge ask for some people.
Right. Removing that isn't just about comfort. It's like dismantling a physical toll booth on a highway. Think of it like a mandatory, complicated login screen on a new app.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
If you make desperate people jump through this physical submissive hoop right at the start, they'll just uninstall the app. They'll walk away. So adapting a rigid message for a diverse audience is really the ultimate lesson in effective communication.
It really is. Because if you enforce rigid compliance, you build resistance. But if you offer a shared, accessible experience, you build a community.
But by removing those strict religious requirements, they suddenly had a secular gap to fill. If they weren't relying on pure faith, they needed an objective authority. Is that why Dr. William D. Silkworth was brought in?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the blueprint needed scientific weight. So Silkworth wrote the doctor's opinion.
Which defined the condition, right?
It defined alcoholism not as a moral failing, but as a physical allergy and a mental obsession. And they placed this medical diagnosis right at the very beginning of the book.
Oh, so before the spiritual solution is even introduced.
Correct. It brilliantly validated the condition for skeptics right out of the gate.
Because by framing it as a physical allergy, Dr. Silkworth bypassed the moral guilt. I mean, you can't argue with an allergy.
Right, exactly.
Just like you can't argue with a peanut allergy. It neutralized the shame, and that opened the door for treatment.
That's the psychological brilliance of it. And, speaking of validation, they also needed to justify the physical book itself because it had a massive $3.50 price tag.
Which, during the Great Depression, $3.50 is a fortune.
It really was. So printing it on this unusually thick, bulky paper wasn't just some aesthetic choice. It was a psychological sales tactic.
Oh, so they wanted the buyer to feel like they were getting a hefty medical textbook, not just a flimsy pamphlet.
Exactly. And that physical weight is literally how it earned the nickname the Big Book.
That is amazing.
It's incredible how deliberate it all was. By the time the 1939 edition finalized those famous first 164 pages, the transformation was complete. The text had shifted from a rigid course of action to a collaborative program of suggestion.
So they successfully open-sourced the software so anyone could run it. But we want to leave you with a thought. Some traditionalists argue that those 1939 edits actually watered down the text.
Yeah, it's a huge debate.
Right. So if you broaden a life-saving message to make it accessible to everyone, do you risk diluting the raw, high-octane potency that saved the original pioneers? When you unlock the code so anyone can use it, does the system lose its original power? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.